in this episode of the Critical Oxygen Podcast.
What I am looking for is if we are seeing positive progression, motivation is high, athlete is responding well, sleeping well, nutrition's been on point, not necessarily. They can wake up fatigued. Of course, there's going to be fatigue, especially when you're building load or when you're throwing intensity at an athlete. It's more of how does that fatigue go through the...
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Critical Oxygen Podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your athletic potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson, and today we're joined by continuing guest host, Aaron Geiser, where we're going to talk about recovery days and down weeks. Aaron, welcome back to the show.
How's it going, Phil?
Good, man. Always good to talk to you again. It's a Friday for us. It's probably not a Friday when this is being released, but this is a good way to wrap up my week.
What's a Friday? What does that mean? What does that mean?
No, the definition of Friday is just the end of the week when you might have 4 hours of downtime afterwards, if that's even possible. No, today Aaron and I are going to talk about recovery days, when to have one, how to know when to do a recovery day, and then down weeks. And one of the things I think that spurred this idea a little bit was I was talking to Aaron about my lower back kind of hurting me last week, and I'd also been telling him that, like, hey, my motivation and stuff just hasn't really been there. And he was like, well, maybe it's time to take a little bit of a rest and kind of recuperate, because those are kind of maybe some of the signs that Aaron's looking at when he's talking to his athletes. So Aaron, if you wouldn't mind just kind of, I know I'm kind of jumping the gun, but talking about down weeks, like your philosophy at EndureIQ about, like, say, down weeks, if you guys do them, if you don't, what are the signs that you're looking for in an athlete before you would actually implement a down week? And let's just start with a definition. So a down week would be something where you're always progressing, you're building up your volume, you're building up your intensity, and then a down week would be doing a certain percentage of that. So a certain percentage of the volume and intensity on a given week, with the idea that you're then able to kind of recover a little bit more, bounce back from the stresses that you've been incurring over time, and then come back stronger. So yeah, Aaron, if you want to just start with that, we can get the conversation rolling.
So at EndureIQ, we do look at both pyramidal and periodization style training, which pyramidal is more of reactionary on behalf of the athlete and how they're adapting, while periodization is more of just you take a standard block, you build, recover, or build, and recover. It's one... This is important to recognize your athletes. Sometimes athletes do have the ability to build over a 3 or 4 week period, and some just need that 4th or 5th week to be a recovery period, where others don't. So one, recognizing your athletes. Two, this is where I have my athletes fill out a lot of my athletes, I should say, fill out a wellness measure on a day-to-day basis. It's 10 questions, gives me an idea of what type of fatigue they're carrying before the activity, when they wake up, how they feel through the course of the day, how they feel going into the workout, how they feel coming out of the workout, how they feel like their nutrition was, how their motivation is. So there's a number of analysis from the athlete's perspective that goes into their answers. I compare this with heart rate variability. I compare it to how their week's worth of training has been, or a couple of days worth of training has been. And that allows me to make some decisions. Now, with this, often if I'm going to give an athlete, I predominantly work off of a pyramidal style. Mm-hmm. Some of the older athletes, I do just kind of get into a routine of, it's just shown they respond a little bit better if we do have a build and recover. So build for 3 or 4 weeks and then a recovery 1 week for the older athletes. But for most other athletes, I do look at it as pyramidal approach where if the athlete is adapting positively to the stress that we're placing upon them, why should we take a step back?
Hmm.
If everything is showing a positive trend, it's almost like you're taking the foot off the pedal when you really don't need to. So just continue to push forward in that case. So I still don't take this in a general approach. Each athlete, even as I said, with the older and even younger athletes, I still look at it as how they adapt and kind of working and developing and evolving the process with each individual athlete. But
Hmm.
really what I am looking for is, if we are seeing positive progression, motivation is high, athlete is responding well, sleeping well, nutrition's been on point. Not necessarily, they can wake up fatigued. Of course, there's going to be fatigue, especially when you're building load or when you're throwing intensity at an athlete. It's more of, how does that fatigue go through the day? When you wake up,
Hmm.
you start moving around, you maybe get a meal in, energy goes up. Okay, we're good. And then again, as I said, I am looking at heart rate variability, and I traditionally do not make adjustments on a 1 day scoring average. It's typically a 3 or a 7 day. So if I start to see a trend over a 3 day period, or I see a trend over the 7 day rolling calendar, that's where
Hmm.
I would start to look at making adjustments, whether I just back down for the day, lower the intensity, or give them a complete off day or couple of off days.
Hmm.
So it really, this is one of those living and breathing organisms that doesn't necessarily have a straightforward answer, but I am reacting to that athlete. And it's more of living in the moment. And yes, I might pull a workout out from under them on that day,
Hmm.
but that's what shows to be the best approach, rather than just saying, hey, you know what, in 3 weeks you're going to have that either lower week or you're going to have a
Right.
lower couple of days. I would much rather look at it as a day-to-day approach. And most of my athletes are looking at big goals. They are either performing as a professional, or they're trying to compete within high levels of the overall age group division or their division itself. So I feel like every day can be critical. And when I say critical, it doesn't mean that we need to push the level. Sometimes it's pulling the lever back.
Hmm.
So it really has a bit of all of those factors when I make that decision. And one of, if Phil, if you ask me what the most important one is, it's typically motivation, because
Hmm.
motivation has one where it can turn things down really, really quickly. And there's a lot of research shown on going into a workout with a positive mindset compared to a negative mindset, and the outcomes that are connected to both of those, like emotional factors or motivational factors going into a workout. And often, if we're seeing motivation struggle for a couple of days, I'm 100% pulling the reins back and having the athlete change mindset, because it's critical at that point. If we
Hmm.
continue to push that athlete, you're gonna more likely push them to a burnout state, and they're just going to either start mailing in workouts or they're going to start missing workouts, and you don't want either of those things to start taking place.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think and that was probably the first sign, that I was heading, the trajectory was a little bit down. And, because we were talking, and I was like, yeah, I just hadn't been motivated, for the last, like week or so. I had been, like getting on the bike, like, I don't know if I want to do this. And I had like been pushing through it. And that's just how I have always kind of operated, is let's just push through like the not wanting to do things, and then you can get a down week later. But in all actuality, what I should have done is I just said, oh yeah, I feel not motivated to actually do my workout today. Let's do something else, maybe that's going to uh you know take that focus and that stress away from like getting on the bike and doing a hard workout. And then maybe in a couple of days you come back and you do a hard workout, right? um, once you're actually mentally feeling back into it. I think the danger is that if you are pushing through kind of that, like, if it's always a grind, then that's going to be a challenge. But if you're pushing through that mental lack of motivation, you're digging yourself a deeper and deeper hole. And sometimes to get out of that lack of motivational hole takes a lot longer than the physical side of things does too. For example, one of the things that again stirred this on was like I and for my standards and my purposes, I had been crushing a bunch of workouts leading up to, uh, you know, the the lack of motivation. 2 weeks ago, started to have a little bit of a lack of motivation, and then leading into that next week, there's a few things that I wanted to record to be able to show people, like, oh, here's how you use NIRS for a threshold workout. Here's how I'm using it for a VO2 max workout. So I did a threshold workout, a VO2 max workout, and then an hour long running workout back to back to back, which right there, that's just silly, progression in training intervention stuff as it is. And then through that time, I was getting less motivated. I had been doing a bunch of yard work and stuff like that, which isn't inherently bad, but eventually kind of exacerbated a back injury that I had had previously. And then doing all those hard workouts hurt my back. Motivation just went absolutely tanked. So then I was like, okay, well, I don't want to work out anyways. So I'm going to take, after Friday, I'm going to just take a few days off and then I'll start getting back into it because I was limited physically, but also emotionally, I was just kind of not even in it. So I'm finally back out of like the motivational sort of side of things, and my back is finally getting better. But it's one of those things where if I would have just been a little bit more in tune with how those, like the mental side of things, the physical side of things were interacting with each other, I might have been able to get away with, just taking Saturday and Sunday off, and or not doing a hard workout, taking Saturday and Sunday off, and then getting back to it. Because again, I stress this all the time on the podcast, is specificity, consistency, and then progression. And it's the consistency and specificity which are really going to move the needle the most. The progression is a product of the consistency, like being able to recover from those workouts. And consistency isn't just consistently working out, it's consistently knowing what's best for your body and making those decisions on the right day, exactly like what you're talking about. So I like that approach. What'd you call it? Pyramidal?
Permidio.
Pyramidal. The pyramidal approach, where you're interacting with your athlete on a day-to-day basis. You're watching how their mental status is changing, how their physiological status is changing, how their mechanical status is changing. And you as the coach are then taking all that into synthesis, making a decision to say, yeah, maybe today you're just not ready, for a VO2 max workout. Because there is nothing more degrading than going into a VO2 max workout, or just like an interval workout in general, thinking you can hit a bunch of numbers and then your body not responding correctly, but you still pushing through and trying to actually get that workout done. That, like, you don't walk away with any positive physiological benefits, mostly negative mental mental ramifications to it. And as opposed to, it's like every Tuesday doesn't have to be a VO2 max workout. That's just like, this like weird time construct we have in our brains. Whereas, like, yeah, maybe a day off where you just go walking and enjoy the day outside was actually probably what you needed. And then you could do a VO2 max workout 2 days later. It's like, I can almost guarantee you're not going to lose fitness from that. But if you get injured or you need to take time off, then you might be losing some fitness.
Well, and the other piece of the puzzle is, and this is where I think knowing yourself, knowing your athletes, if you do coach athletes, is extremely vital. Because sometimes when it does come to motivation, maybe you just need to change what the work. Maybe the athlete just needs a different workout
Mm-hmm.
or something. Even it doesn't even need to pull away from an off day. It might be, well, man, they've had some really tough VO2 max sessions the last couple of weeks. Maybe I throw them either another aerobic ride, or I structure it where it's 80% aerobic and then just throw a little bit of spiky effort somewhere in there, maybe some
Hmm.
threshold efforts. I think sometimes it's also recognizing your athlete, knowing what they might need to also flip that switch and get them pulled back mentally as well. It's, I don't always think that it has to be an off day. Sometimes, and there are times where I think as athletes, where if we do have a coach pull a day off and give us an off day, we either get mad or you're like, well, I'm failing. So
Hmm.
sometimes just, okay, well, we're going to give you something different can also play a benefit and allow your coached athlete to recognize, hey, I'm trying to work with you here to get you out of this slump. And this is the way that I feel like it's going to do it. And maybe just a little bit of a mental refresher, a change in that. It's almost baseball. Let's throw you a curveball. Let's throw you a changeup. Keep things a
Yep.
little bit off balance. So therefore, you can have that additional mental stimulation that might start to be weaning down because the motivation's not there, because you're just kind of seeing the same routine or seeing a workout that you've seen a couple of times, and you just need to change.
Hmm. Yeah, that was, I think that for me was part of it. Is I had been kind of pursuing, hitting higher and higher VO2 max or power outputs during my VO2 max workouts. And sometimes I almost take that a little bit too far, where it's like a little bit ego driven, where I'm like, okay, well, I hit 400 last week. In order to progress, I need to hit 405 this week, right? And that's not always appropriate either. Sometimes progression means you're doing the same workouts 2 weeks in a row just to see how you can handle them. Or like you were saying, I really like that. Like when we talk, it's like I have a tendency to be like, well, you're either exercising or you're on an off day or something like that. It's like, no, no, no. You can switch it around to doing like an aerobic training day or a recovery day versus a zone 2 day, for example, right? Like those in terms of stress are different, but you're still going to get on the bike and do an hour's worth of work. It's just the intensity, or like the mindset and the goal are going to be slightly shifted.
Right.
Um,
Well, it's,
so
I,
go ahead.
I actually, sorry to cut you off. I had an athlete this week. His brother was in town. He went rock climbing and playing basketball one day. Awesome. I love
Yeah.
that idea. Let's go do it. It's going to give you a mental refresh. It's something active that can move the needle, and it's not something that we've been just hammering away at for the last couple of months.
Hmm.
Heck yeah, go do it. Have fun. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, and that I also think like when yeah, I was talking to another coach that I work with. She was telling me, she was like, yeah, sometimes we have like our routines and stuff like that, right? When no one's around, it's not holiday time, it's not stressful at work, like other things like that that are, very manageable. But then when we get around, say holiday time, and this is a perfect discussion, like as we're talking, it's the week after Christmas, and I'm sure people had family and friends and all of that sort of stuff. That just adds another level of stress and kind of throws curveballs into your ability to maintain a routine. So having days where it's like, oh, yeah, my brother was in town, and it's like it's okay not to do your workout, but then a good alternative to that would be to go rock climbing and play basketball or do something along those lines, right? Where you're still getting out and being active, but you're not like, oh, guys, I have to maintain my routine. That's going to be stressful, first of all. Then, second of all, the next stressful thing is like, well, dude, I'm only in town for 2 days every once in a while. Come and hang out with me. No, no, no. I got to get my 2 hour workout in, and then I can do something. And that's like, so it's everything is, it's like you have to take into account that, like fluctuations in life also are inducing greater stress. So if you have like presentations at work, if you have like Aaron and I are planning to do like a testing for a week at his place with a bunch of his athletes. For me personally, I'm going to be running around like a chicken with my head cut off. It's still going to be sewn on, but it's going to be dangling there. And I'm going to be trying to maintain all of the different athletes and getting them in order and making sure that they're doing their tests. That's not a time for me to be like, okay, on top of all of this, I should also be doing my 2 hour long ride and my VO2 max workout and all of this other stuff on top of it.
Oh, little do you know, we're going to make sure that we have time for that.
Oh, no, no, no. I hope we can still do stuff, but it's also, I've learned in the past that when I start to, when I get like too attached to like my routine, then it just overly stresses me out. So I'm not going in with any expectation of like, oh, well, like it's going to be this perfect, workout or whatever it is. Hey, if I'm able to go running with you and your dogs don't actually, like kill me because they're, they're too fit. Dude, that would be great. I would love to do stuff like that. But I'm just not going in with the expectation that it's going to be a very high training load week for me personally, right? Because that, I think, is setting myself up for a little bit of failure and a little bit of, kind of that mental downturn that we were talking about.
Well, and it's the flexibility of, as you said, it's just the flexibility of workout can take a different shape.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even, in that case, okay, I've been progressing the last couple of weeks with these runs and these bikes. Well, maybe it is that step back, and if you strategically place it as a recovery week, because there's additional stress there, it almost is a steady state stress load,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a lower volume intensity load week. And then you can come back, you might be more positive from muscle recovery, though you're
Mm-hmm.
still kind of holding the same stress load as you did the week before.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One thing I do want to try out is the ice plunge that you have, or the cold tub, because oh man, 43 degrees. Is it 43 in the winter or 41 in the winter?
It's 41 in the winter, so
Oh, it's nice and
you
toasty. Oh
we're
no.
taking those 2 additional degrees.
I'll practice in my bathtub a few times before I
Are you
come out
telling
and
me
see
I
you.
need to up the temperature a couple?
No, maybe I don't know. No, I have, that is something I've been thinking a lot about though, is like, like we've been really talking a lot about like recovery and stuff lately, and I'm like, man, it would be so nice to just have a, like a single like hot tub, cold tub sort of, like one side by side, like in my garage or something like that I could just do like every day, because sometimes it is super helpful to just like get in the warmth and relax. But then I think other times it is really helpful to get, pull a little bit more of that inflammation out by doing a little bit more of that icing. And that was something that actually helped a lot in terms of my back. Is I was taking a little bit of like a leave and everything, and it's not something I recommend to everybody, and I don't necessarily like doing. But when I have an acute injury that everything in my back is spasming, I'm like, okay, I'll take a little bit of a leave. And the heat wasn't really helping, stretching wasn't really helping, other things like that, because I just think I was still in a state of too much inflammation. So I have this big bag of corn that I put on my back, and then I do a little bit of like the cobra pose, and that would, that gave enough relief. And then I was able to actually do some facilitated stretching and other things like that didn't actually bother it more. And that seemed, to actually make my back a little bit less angry. But that would have been one of those things where it's like, if I had a cold plunge, I just get in that for a little bit, maybe reduce a little bit of the inflammation, go and do the, like the slow movements, like the yoga movements and other things like that. And then, slowly get that a little bit happier, and then you can start to do the stretching and like other things, and then do the heat a little bit later to then get the blood flow and the oxygen and the nutrients back to that area.
Well, it'll be here.
Sweet. No, man, I'm excited. I think this is gonna be a lot of fun. And for those of you who don't know, because I don't think we've ever actually touched on it, on the podcast, is Aaron, or I have a mobile physiology lab where I have a metabolic device, a bunch of Moxie monitors, heart rate monitor, those sort of things. And I have the ability basically just to take it wherever. So Aaron's taken me up on that offer. We're going to go and we're going to test a bunch of his athletes and we're going to get some baseline physiological assessments done. We're going to identify limiters. We're going to identify zones and other things like that. And then, he's going to take all of that data as the coach. He's going to use it for his purposes to help coach the athletes a little bit better. And then we're going to reassess, come probably maybe the middle of the summer or something like that, where, the athletes are slowly getting into their competition phase and getting ready to ramp up and get to a point where they're about to, really hit those A races hard. So if anyone's interested in that sort of thing, that's my plug for the remote physiology testing that I do. And he lives in Kentucky. I live in Oregon. So I'm flying down and gonna be around there for a week. So if you're a coach and you want to set something up like that, just let me know. But yeah, back to the idea of like an off day, a recovery day, or a down week. We've kind of touched on like the down week sort of side of things and the decision making that kind of goes into that. For for your athletes, how do you then take that and say, okay, we're going to do a recovery day, an off day? Do you have like set times during the week? This is always something I struggled with like triathletes, is there's so many things you need to be training at a time, right? Swimming, biking, running, strength training. How, do you build in like a specific rest day every week for athletes? I think the answer is it depends, but, and if so, how do you actually make that decision to do that?
With the exposure that I got, and again, as you said, it does depend, but what I have found from athletes is that so many times early in my coaching career, athletes would come off of a rest day and feel like garbage.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of played off of that and then just started to implement just an easy active recovery day. Doesn't need to really be long, just something that forces them to get some blood flow, forces them to get some activity, whether it be a swim, whether it be a bike, what fits into that athlete's routine, and then move them to, typically I have it on a Friday or the day before their long brick, and then 2 days before their long run, because they at least
Mm-hmm.
go in a little bit more fresh with those two workouts, but also not clunky. Because if I did stack it that way and individuals consistently were going in clunky to a key brick session and a key long run session, it just didn't that did not work for me. So I needed to adjust that and change the narrative to make sure that the athlete was getting a benefit and feeling better in the longest effort, the more functionally robust workout of the week. So that's not to say that some athletes don't get days off. I mean, there are athletes, whether it be from religious practices or other things, where maybe Sunday is a complete rest day, or other athletes that just need an additional day off. It's important to implement that into that routine. And what I would end up doing in that case is most likely finding that rest day to not be backed for a critical workout. So
Mm-hmm.
almost like ease them back into the rest of the week, get them into a good flow again, and then have the critical workouts following kind of that one day to bring them back into, and maybe it would just be depending on time and the type of athlete, run, bike, and swim all aerobic, or bike and swim aerobic, or run and swim aerobic, and then move them into more critical workouts through the rest of the week. But it really, to me, is one, again, knowing the athlete, recognizing that if you've been told your entire life, hey, you need to have a rest day, you need to have a rest day. But if you come out and it either destroys a workout day afterwards
Hmm.
or destroys a couple of days afterwards, are we really getting the response that we want to in that case? And I would say no. So we need to change that routine into something else. So if the day if the athlete does need a day off, I traditionally come back with exposure to at least two of the sports, if not all three of the sports, just depending on the
Hmm.
athlete, their availability and who they are. And traditionally, it's just a little bit of more welcoming back to activity and then starting a little bit more intensity as the week leads in after that day off or after those couple of days off. It really just it depends on the scenario and the athlete, but I do feel like critical workouts following an off day have just shown me enough that more athletes than not are a little bit clunky.
Hmm. Yeah, I've found with myself that doing, having like a full rest day on a Sunday does kind of just like, it takes the pressure off of, continually having that routine and all of that sort of stuff. So it's a good mental break, good physical break. Obviously, like I don't try to be sedentary all day. I try to go out, play with the dogs. I have a disc golf basket set up in the backyard, so I'll go and I'll throw some frisbees, walk back and forth. That's normally pretty fun. Um, go for a hike or a walk with my fiance, um, and then and just other things like that. It gets a little harder when it's like the middle of the winter and it's like kind of gross out, but you just bundle up and you make it happen. But and then the day that I come back, that Monday, I generally like a a moderate aerobic workout. So because I am coming off of like a day of complete rest, if it's a cycling workout, I can go a little bit harder, than I would for, subsequent days after like a hard day or something like that, which is nice because then it kind of gives me it's a little ego boost in the beginning of the week where I'm like, yeah, that was a solid workout and everything. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be
Mhm.
it could be exactly like what you're saying, just touch on, get in the pool, swim, 30, 45 minutes, get on the bike for a little bit, maybe run a little bit. And it's interesting because I've gone back and forth in terms of, like the requirements for like say a triathlete, and it's always one of those things where it just seems like there's a lot of things to fit um in a limited amount of time. So, it's if you are a triathlete and you're listening, it really comes down to what do you have time for and how many workout slots can you actually fit in? And then from there you have to just be realistic with your goals, because if you can't fit in, essentially like two workouts a day or something along those lines, it's going to be pretty challenging to touch on and get enough volume for those three disciplines that you need to be good at the sport.
Well, and the other thing is, it mi- if you come off of a couple of off days, don't come back and try to catch up on fitness. That's one thing that
Yes.
you cannot really catch up on fitness ever. So what we missed, we just wave goodbye. We come back and we continue on the process that we were.
Mm-hmm.
You don't take the days off to then come back and thrash yourself for 3 or 4 days and then end up in the exact same spot. Come back with the same goal that you had before you went into that recovery phase, because it does you no good. It does you no good to just come out and just pummel yourself again.
Mm-hmm.
And then, man, motivation stinks again, coach. Well, I wonder why.
Well, no duh, because you gave yourself a recovery day and then you just implement, or you just put so much more stress on yourself that you're, right back where you started. And that was actually, from a life perspective, that's actually a really key point too, because I think like, there's all these people who are like, "Oh, I'm just going to work really, really hard, take a 2-week vacation, and then be remotivated to do my job for another 6 months. And then I'll take my next vacation and so on and so forth. And that personally has never worked for me. It's always been like, oh, well, I find that if I take off, at least one day from whether it's exercise, whether it's my business, whatever it is, then that gives me the ability to recuperate enough to then come back and continually slowly build those the capacity for work, the capacity for training, like whatever it is.
And it's it's just smarter to look at things from the whole approach, and don't get short-sighted. Don't get to the point where it's I just often I talk to athletes and it's like, I missed those 2 workouts this week. Well, I'm going to hammer them through. No, no, you're not, because that's just we obviously had an overload of stress. Let's progress up to that level again rather than getting right back up to that level of stress after a day or 3 off. It's just
Mm-hmm.
we got to be in that case. There's got to be more intelligence in the process.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you look at stocks, if you've ever invested in the stock market or anything like that, if you look at it every single day, you see there's not really much pattern, right? It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down, it's flat, it's up, it's down, so on and so forth. But if you zoom out, the general trajectory of the stock market is always trending upwards for the most part, other than when you hit depressions and other things like that. So if we could take or learn from that and implement that into our training, where we say, okay, well, some days I'm going to have really, really good workouts. Other days are going to be really shitty. And then other days are going to be just rest days where I don't do the workout. I'm kind of just maintaining other things like that. But if you come back and you say, okay, well, this is where I was when I, like before my 2-day break or before my down week or whatever it is, I'm going to start slowly building up again from there. And if you have that positive trajectory, that's going to play dividends, because at the end of the day, the people who are the most successful at endurance sports are the ones who have been training the longest and most consistently, and the people who are able to manage that stress and stay injury free, or keep from long periods of hiatus, from the actual sport itself. And I think that is something that I just want to keep, and I have to say it out loud because it's the same thing for me. I run into these traps where I'm like, oh man, last week I did this for the run, this for the bike, these were my hard workouts, so next week I have to make them a little bit better. It's like, no, you don't. Even if if you were feeling unmotivated and kind of overloaded at the end of the week, obviously that was too much stress. So come back with the same, maybe a little bit less, and see if you can get and see if just repeating that will then make you feel better at the end of the week. Because if it does, that means that you're on that positive trajectory, as opposed to if you overdid it one week, took a couple days off, and then overdid it again, and then took a couple of days off and then overdid it again, your general trajectory will be downwards. So our whole goal is to shift that trajectory from down to up. But it's much easier said than done. And that's why, again, like I think having a coach or just somebody who you can either talk to, or if you're really, really good, not myself, at being objective about your data and how you're feeling and making those decisions, then you're going to set yourself up for long-term success. And when I say success, I mean long-term positive trajectory over your time in whatever sport it is.
And taking a step back and also just creating a either a sheet or checkpoints that you're evaluating is always a good thing too. Because as you've talked about, Phil, sometimes you get into this state where you either want to increase power or you want to increase the repetitions on your week over week. And you talked about it a little bit, but sometimes it's just a matter of stepping back, doing the exact same stinking thing, and then looking at, oh, one, last week, this was an RPE of 9. This week it was a 8.
Mm-hmm.
And my heart rate reflected that because it came down a couple of beats. Or my heart rate did not, it took longer to get to its peak through that workout and also more efficiently recovered in the
Mm-hmm.
down sets. These are things that you can also look at without even progressing the workout itself because
Mm-hmm.
you're progressing yourself as an athlete with the same workout. So having an idea that these are a couple of the goals that I want to have. And there are multiple ways to get from that point to this goal or that goal, but recognizing that I can get to that goal by doing the same, really doing the same thing every week in and week out. It's going to be boring, but you're going to recognize that from a physiological standpoint, from a fitness level standpoint, you're going to be making improvements. And these are also still things that you can look at. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not always taking the number to a number that you can't handle. Maybe it's just staying right where you're at and seeing your number
Mm-hmm.
get better week in and week out. So it's recognizing it doesn't always have to be pushing the watts 5, pushing the watts 10, pushing the set 2, pushing the watt or set 4. You don't necessarily need to do that. Sometimes it is good to do the exact same workout back to back weeks and compare.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these were the same. Okay. Body didn't make much of a change. How can I implement something to make it a positive change next week?
Mm-hmm.
If you do the same workout and you say, oh man, this week compared to last week, I had some of those factors that I talked about earlier where heart rate didn't get as high or the heart rate recovered quicker.
Mm-hmm.
That's a positive change. Okay, I'm going to follow some of the things that I was doing that last couple of weeks leading into the back to back workouts. I'm going to do that same thing here this next block. That can actually help you decide on what you're going to be doing in your next group of weeks because obviously that was benefiting you. But if you're always kind of ticking up the ladder or stepping up every week, sometimes you're not actually seeing what that comparison is to your baseline
Mm-hmm.
and you're not learning, am I actually making improvements or am I just continuing to destroy myself because, hey, I'm having fun?
Yeah. No, I know, and that's I think a lot of people run into the same kind of pitfalls as I do, and that's why it's great to it's great I think for me to share this is how my thought process is, and then you with your experience as a coach being like, yeah, you don't always have to progress, right? It's not always I went from 400 to 405 this week. It's I stayed at 400 and felt better. Like it didn't feel like I was going to die the last two sets. Or on the flip side of things, it felt like I was going to die the last two sets. Okay, well, maybe I overdid it the last couple of days. So maybe this is the time I need to implement a recovery day, a down day. And I think, just to kind of round things out and wrap things up, it's a recovery day or a rest day, whatever it is, doesn't always have to just be on one day of the week. It can be if that's something that really really helps you, helps continue to move the needle in a positive direction. Then having a recovery day could be good. Having or a full rest day, having a recovery day can be implemented on any given day where you feel things are trending a little bit downward, and by doing say a workout or doing something would keep that on a downward trajectory. So as opposed to doing the workout, do a recovery workout, and then hopefully that course corrects in the moment. From a down week perspective, I think that that is something that is a little bit trickier to pinpoint. Some people do well with 4 weeks up, 1 week down, 3 weeks up, 1 week down, whatever it is. But I don't think it's as cut and dry as just saying, oh, for every athlete, you should do 4 weeks up, 1 week down. Because if an athlete is managing their stress and managing their recovery days correctly and managing their rest days correctly, then they might continually have a positive trajectory within their performance, their progression, all of that sort of stuff. So it doesn't really make sense if they're not accumulating a boatload of fatigue to then, reduce their volume and intensity for a week just to do it, because that's how we've always done it, right? Yeah.
And that right there is the evolution of what we do. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's where things are trending. And I think it's going to continue to push a little bit further in this direction just because we have more analysis, statistics, everything to go off of and make better decisions. And yes, some athletes might respond really, really well to that format. We're not telling you to change it, but other athletes, you might be preventing yourself from having a little bit further development if you're always taking that response when the body doesn't necessarily need that. And that's one of the things that I found that I enjoy coaching myself from this perspective because I am a little bit more objective. I utilize my practices, but in the moment, I can allow things to adjust based on how I'm feeling or how things go. And it's just like, well, at first VO2 max set had 10, whatever it might be, 8, 10, 12, 15, whatever. It felt pretty good. All right, let's tick this thing up. Okay, that was just right. Good thing I got a third or a fourth set. I'm just going to continue to do that. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe I didn't tick it up enough. Maybe I need to go up. But it's having that flexibility going into the sessions for myself. I know what I want to accomplish, but I
Mm-hmm.
have a little bit of a floating ceiling in that case. And based on how I'm feeling, how things are going, what is presenting itself within the middle of that workout, huh, why am hey, my heart rate in this particular workout last week, it was at the top of zone 2. This week it's more towards the middle or lower part of zone 2. Well, let's go hunting for a couple of extra watts. Let's go
Mm-hmm.
hunting for a couple of extra seconds on the run. If my heart rate stays in those same parameters that I'm shooting for, but I'm either putting a higher power output or a higher pace output, hey, I'm moving the needle positively. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that's what we're trying to do is progress. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just taking that approach of progression can take place within the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, getting to a place where Aaron is at in terms of being able to make those decisions on the fly, because I get people asking me this on Instagram all the time, is like, well, what's going to be the best, or how did you figure out that 400 watts was going to be the best for you for that workout? And in all honesty, it's a lot of trial and error. It's okay, I'm feeling pretty good today. Like, I think I started my 30/30s at like 360 watts, because I was like, okay, well, that's kind of what I got to during my physiological assessment and testing. Let's try 360. Okay, that was way too easy. That felt like, a walk in the park. Okay, let's bump it up to 390. Okay, well, that was a little harder, but it wasn't hard enough. Then I bumped it up to 410 or something like that, or 420, and that's where I was like, okay, that was the one. That was where I kind of had to draw the line. So it's okay to play with that sort of stuff. Like, if you know that your max heart rate is a certain one, and we're kind of getting sidetracked, and we can talk about this in terms of like a progression episode, but all in all, you're going to be better off in terms of your recovery, your trend, that positive trajectory like we were talking about, if you are listening to your body, if you're listening to how your body is responding to things. And that can be from a macro perspective, which is like would be a couple of weeks where you're looking at things like HRV, how you're mentally and emotionally dealing with things. It could be from a micro perspective within workouts. How are you dealing with the work, like the intervals that you're doing? How are you dealing What's your motivation during a zone 2 ride that's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours long, those sort of things. And it's all stuff that I think if you don't practice it, then you never get good at it. So you need to practice checking in with yourself, but also checking in with whatever metrics you're measuring. What's my heart rate right now? What's my power output right now? And then slowly over time, you will get more and more proficient at saying, "Oh man, during my warm-ups, generally my heart rate at 180 watts is only 120 beats per minute. But today it's 140 beats per minute. Holy crap. My physiology is not responding the way that I wanted to. Oh, am I dehydrated? Did I not get enough sleep last night? Other things like that. Because then you can start to play this iteration game of, okay, well, what do I need to do in order to show up, to the quote unquote start line of my workout in a better or more recovered state? And that's not to say that every day has to be a perfectly recovered day, but you should see again over time that positive trajectory as you go if you're implementing proper recovery.
And if I could add this one point,
mm-hmm.
This is where it's important to recognize what the physiological feel of that workout is supposed to accomplish as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you go into a VO2 max, and as we have built into our workouts, we want you to be at an 8.5 to a 9.5 RPE. There's days where the watts might not match up with that feel, but if you're sitting there throwing 30-30s or 30-15s or 40-20s or whatever it might be, and you're feeling a 6, you're not accomplishing the task that day. So
mm-hmm.
it's pulling in more of what you're supposed to feel, what you're seeing, and then reacting to what that is. But it's an understanding of the workout. Recognize VO2 max, aka hard as hell. It's not supposed to be just that wasn't too bad. It was pretty easy. We might say that at the end of a workout, but when you're in the middle of that repetition, that's when you need to ask this question. And often when how difficult was that? Oh, it was about a 6. Inside the effort? Nah, it was about an 8.5. Okay, we nailed what we were shooting for.
Yeah.
So I think the best answer for what you had just talked about, Phil, and when you get that answer, is understand what the workout is supposed to subject you to.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't have parameters, set parameters on what that means from a physiological and a feel perspective, and then go searching for that look. Whether if it's
mm-hmm.
a heart rate driven, if it's a feel driven, these things are important. They're relevant to each workout. So go find that and let that be your guide within the workout. And if the numbers aren't there, or you're not matching up with the feel, make the change within the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We'll leave you guys with that. As always, you can catch me on Instagram at Critical02 if you guys have any questions about recovery, off days, down weeks, anything like that, or anything we talked about on the podcast. Please reach out and ask. You can catch Aaron at Aaron Geiser on Instagram. You can comment down below if you're on YouTube. You can also respond or ask questions to us on Spotify. So there's a little bit of interaction, but I don't think there's any way for me to actually respond. So for those of you who have been giving us feedback on Spotify, I really appreciate it. Note, I am hearing you, and I am trying to, address some of the things that are being told. I just don't have a way of actually responding to you on the app, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, so I'm hearing you and all of that. And, again, we really appreciate all the support and everything that you guys are giving us. If you guys have any questions, any comments, any topics, any people you want us to talk to, let us know, and we will try to make that happen. You can always catch Aaron on Saturdays on his Endure IQ long ride. So make sure you're doing that on Zwift. You can ask him questions there. And I think yeah, I think that's that. Oh, and if you're interested in doing physiology testing or anything like that, I do remote physiology testing. So please let me know if you are interested in that. And with that, we'll catch you guys in the next one.